Welcome into another edition of Hand Raised Guys, presented by Comer. Need those Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. On tonight's show, we're joined by Ole Miss assistant baseball coach Carl Lafferty, Neal Stratton of Inside the League, and Chris Easterling of the Akron Beacon Journal and Gannett, Ohio. We'll talk Ole Miss baseball, obviously. We'll talk a lot of NFL as well. We'll get to those interviews in a minute. But first, I want to tell you about Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. Different names, same great products and services. If you live in Oxford, Batesville, Tupelo, or the surrounding area, call Comer, 662-801-1777. If you live in Hernando, Memphis, Olive Branch, South Haven, those areas, get in touch with the people at Southern, 662-429-4429. It's cold out right now a little bit. The baseball season is approaching, which means spring is on its way. That time of year that you're using your heat one day, your air the next. You want to make sure everything's in tip-top shape. So get in touch with the people at Southern and Comer, and they will take great care of you. This will be the Friday Oxford Exxon podcast. The Oxford Exxon, located on Highway 6 West in Oxford, just next door to the Oxford Crystal, where you can enjoy the new Sunriser made with the larger round sausage. The combo is just $5.99. It's a great value to start your day right. I'm coming to you from the Clark Ford Studios. Clark Ford's in Amory, Mississippi, 662-257-1900. Call that number. Ask for my friend Corey Clark. Tell Corey what Ford product you're looking for. He'll send you a quote within 15 minutes in business hours. It's right to the bottom line. No hassle, no haggle. You get your quote, and then the rest is up to you. You can shop that quote around, of course. It's your prerogative. Or you can do what I've done 4 times now, what I recommend that you do. And that's hop into a Clark Ford today. You will love the product. You will absolutely love the service. Corey and the people at Clark Ford, they want to be your car guy. They want to be your truck guy. They'll prove to you what that means when you make the call. 662-257-1900. Guest join on the myperfectfranchise.net hotline. If you are... Sorry about that. I messed up. I lost my script. If you're an experienced entrepreneur, you're looking to diversify, if you're looking to kind of take control of your own career, just get in touch with Andy Ludicky. He'll help you. He's a longtime Rivals board member, a diehard college football fan. He's a franchise veteran. He owns multiple franchises and businesses. He uses his expertise to help others find their American dream through a very thorough and free consultation process. So call Andy. Put your life, your career in your own hands, 100% free. So you got nothing to lose. Find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. Contact Andy anytime at andy@myperfectfranchise.net or at 404-973-9901. First up on the show, Chase Parham visited with Ole Miss assistant baseball coach Carl Lafferty. Opening day just a week away from Friday. So here's Chase and Carl on the myperfectfranchise.net hotline.
Carl Lafferty now joining us. Just throughout the year. Baseball just a week away. It's February 17th. The Blue Hens in town to face the Rebels. I'll tell you, Carl, I'm a little tired. I don't feel like we had a lot of an off season. I know you too, but in all jokes aside, you were playing until the end of June. You had the celebrations and fall ball and whatnot. Has it come back around faster than usual just because of how it transpired?
Incredibly fast. I would have taken a couple more months, wouldn't have been an issue with me. But I guess it's to be expected. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I was getting off the plane yesterday, so there is an excitement now, obviously with the season here. But yeah, it came quick.
Is there an extra coaching challenge to making sure mindset is on next season after you win a national title? I mean, I know there's, we talked to Mike about this at the media day press conference, and you got a lot of new kids. It's not the same roster at all. A lot of people in new roles, but is there a bit of a, hey, we need to really make sure they're not just fat and happy and kind of back at it?
Yeah, I think Mike's done a pretty good job. And only time will tell. But I think the thing that we had to try to balance was, hey, we do have to turn the page on last year, and this year is this team. This is their legacy. This is their journey. But still being able to, give the members of last year's team, obviously the guys that have graduated or gone on to play pro ball, plus the guys on the current team, the opportunities to be celebrated when it's time to be celebrated, especially this fall. Because I think you got to have both. Now it's a balancing act, but I think internally, with our communication, with our interaction with the kids, it's been about this year, not really about last year. It's about us. It's about right now. It's about how good can this team be.
It's a funny thing because and maybe the media did a poor job talk about Elko and Graham and Bench and all the guys gone, but you guys got a lot of guys back. I mean, frankly, from an offensive standpoint, you've got 4 main returners, then you go into the portal for some guys and whatnot. It's an older team. And does that help too, having some guys back that some leadership's going to come from specific spots? You're not necessarily counting on a ton of freshmen to immediately play in the lineup and things that they will handle that type of thing in a little more mature way.
Absolutely. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you look up and you've got Gonzo and Kemp and Harris and McCants and Chatinier and Wood and guys like that. They're great dudes. They're great leaders, and that experience is big, especially in our league. And then we were fortunate. I think we got some, exciting guys out of the portal, junior college transfer and Ethan Leger. And you look up and, man, it's a chance to be, positionally speaking, junior or older around the whole field. And experience in college baseball usually wins out. Now, we all like to have the really talented freshmen, and I think we've got some talented freshmen that are going to get some at-bats for us this year. But it's certainly nice to have guys with experience coming back and older guys coming in to fill in gaps.
The two transfer portal guys, what was it that you liked about Calarco and Groff when you pick them up out of the portal?
I mean, I think it's easy to look at them and go, hey, these guys got good swings. They look like they have a feel to hit and things like that. But we had some connections to each of them that really gave us some insight on their makeup. And probably the exciting thing, for me is how quickly they got here and just transitioned into being, a part of the fabric of the team, because they're great dudes. I mean, they're really good players, but they're great kids, great clubhouse guys, and they've been fun to coach.
You mentioned Leger. You never fully know, but a guy who at least started at the D1 level, he's at Nichols, he goes JUCO for a year. Have you seen signs on him that maybe he transitions better than some guys from that JUCO standpoint? Because a lot of times JUCO look just like freshmen that first season, and it takes a minute or whatnot. What have you seen by his transition and maturity?
Well, physically, he's talented. I mean, obviously, he turns down, a significant amount of money in the draft last year to come to school. But I think the biggest thing for those kids is just what's between their ears. And he's a really tough kid. He's a really, really competitive kid. He's a confident kid, and not in such a way that's arrogant, but he believes in himself. And I think that's the big thing, because I think a lot of times, whether you're a junior college player or a freshman, you have some doubt, when you step into our league and step out on, our field, and that can make you not perform the way you're capable of. I think you could even look at Tim Elko early in his career. Everybody remembers Tim Elko the last 3, I guess feels like 10 years, but last 3 years, and what a player he was, and obviously his impact on this program was monumental. But the first year or two, it was different for Tim, and he didn't all of a sudden become more talented. He's always been that talented, but sometimes it's the mentality that makes the difference. When you first step on campus.
We'll see what they do on the field starting in a week. But from an on-paper standpoint, is this the deepest and most impressive freshman pitching class you put together?
I mean, there's some really good freshman arms. And I hate putting a lot on them because it is so – I mean, gosh, we think about how good Gunnar Hoagland was. Think about that. I mean, he was a first-rounder out of high school. He was a first-rounder when he left here, $3 million guy. And he took the ball every Sunday his first year here, but it's tough. I mean, his numbers were not Gunnar-esque his freshman year. So I say I'm as excited about these freshman arms as I've ever been. I think it's a really, really talented group. Again, I always have a little bit of caution when I talk about them, just because they're still 18, 19-year-old guys and they're playing in the SEC. But from a fan perspective, they're going to be exciting.
Yeah, it's that deal where I'm having a hard time just from fans slowing down the hype train that is coming with Grayson Saunier right now. And, Mike, I think I might have even asked him this at Media Day. He's only started, or you guys have only started 2 true freshmen on opening weekend the entire time in Mike's tenure. It would have been a third, but you had a rain out. But there's only been 2. What has allowed him to at least be in that conversation? I mean, when we talk about Grayson Saunier, for the fans that haven't seen him, what's the profile? What's made him that much more of at least a name going into a season than maybe some of the really talented freshmen that you guys have had in the past?
I mean, the first thing to look at is his stuff. It's 91, 95. It's a 4-pitch mix, 4 quality pitches. It's a strike thrower. But he's got really good presence. He's really competitive. He's a kid that's dialed in, like, what he does from the days in between he pitches is a separator, and that confidence level that he has in himself. And again, I'm with you. Like, you hate to dump a lot of expectations on a freshman. I think that's unfair, period, in the Southeastern Conference. But he's certainly one to be as excited about as any that we've had come through here.
And you've got 4 or 5 that you could see pretty substantial innings if it fell the right way. And I mean, and maybe those guys have to come a little faster now with Maddox and Mallett's being out, right?
Yeah. I mean, Sam Takoyan, really talented kid, great fastball. JT Quinn, tremendous slider, throws exceptionally hard. Both, those guys throw strikes. Jordan Vera has looked good as he come back this spring. Low 90s fastball with a slider and a lot of pitchability. There's guys in this class from a freshman standpoint that look like they can make an impact.
You had a little bit more of a celebration when they all showed up through the draft, I assume. And I know you lost a couple, but you're like, I know every year you're always like, hey, what's the worst case scenario, and let's build back from there, right? It's always, right. Hey, this is as bad as it can be, and then whatever else happens, hey, it could have been worse. So that's
no doubt. There were some guys that we sweated, absolutely. And to get these guys here on campus was big. I mean, I think talking about that class. We really didn't expect Ferris to show up. We thought we had a good shot at Roman Anthony, but that didn't work out, and for good reason. Both those guys were paid very, very well. But to get the ones we did, it was big.
Not to look too far ahead, but you kind of have to as the recruiting coordinator. You mentioned all the upperclassmen in the field. There's a chance that you guys lose all 8 of those guys at the end of the year. What do you do to go ahead and do what you can to, I hate to say fix that, but mostly you're just trying to accumulate talent. But is that one of those deals where you're just going to have to rely on transfers and portals at some point? You develop everybody you have. I mean, what's sort of the mentality when it's that big of a potential turnover a year down the road?
No, it's a really good question, and it's why I'm bald. But man, to be very candid with you, we have signed a really, really good class with the high school kids. I think any good SEC program, your backbone is going to have to be high school talent. And in that incoming class, you've got Smithwick and Pratt and Trenton Lyons and a number of kids, Braden Randall, Drew Markle. Like, there's a number of position players that are really good. And you look at those guys and you go, man, they can really, really be good for a number of years here. And then I think you look at it and you go, yeah, well, we have to probably go get some portal guys. Sure. Because it is going to be such a turnover. But I think there's young guys on this team, like the Furnaces, the Utermarks, Mason Morris, guys like that are going to get at bats this year. That you hopefully look up and next year at this time we're talking about a nucleus of some of those guys emerging. We're talking about maybe some kids we got in the portal, and we're talking about how excited we are about these freshmen that had such good falls, and then you can kind of mesh that together to put a product on the field that's good. They can go out there and score runs and be competitive.
Does Furnace profile in a similar way to his dad, just straight tools?
I watched Eddie hit one to the back of that tennis court my freshman year. I hope he does that a lot. But yeah, I mean, it's eerie when you look at their swings. They're both physical guys, have some feel to hit, big body dudes. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot to be excited with Will. And again, he's still going through the growing pains of being a freshman, but last week he hit one out of center field. And I think right now for him, he had a pretty solid fall. He can put together some really good at bats, and then you can see some of the freshman stuff come out, just like anybody. I tell people you've got to kind of got to handle it, because Thomas Dillard and Gray Kessinger was they were as good as any players we've ever had here, and their freshman years were tough. Now, the thing I do like about this lineup is I think much different than in Thomas and Gray's case. This lineup's going to be able to give some coverage and let some of those young guys, hit probably toward the bottom of the order where they can get pitched a little bit different and don't feel the pressure like Thomas and Gray did, because it was a really young lineup that they were hitting at that time.
I see this with recruiting all the time and guys that I covered in different ways. And obviously Furnace would count in this. Has there been some dudes come through that you're coaching that you go, God, I played against his dad, that made you feel old, or a couple of those that stick out where you go, hey, wow.
It's happening now.
Yeah.
My friends' kids are getting to recruitable age, and I'm going, oh gosh, man. I am. The years are adding up. So I'm hitting that mark. I think that's the first time that it's happened for me and Clem. It's been in the last year or two. But when you look at Will and go like, yeah, your dad hit one with the old like gold Easton, and it went over the student section to the back of where those tennis courts were. So
yeah, back in like Black Magic days. It's been a bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
What was the offseason emphasis, if there was one, for Hunter Elliott, or was it just take some rest and be the guy you are?
I think he tried to work on his breaking ball. I think that was one of the things that, stuck out this fall. Really good fastball, really good changeup. Tried to work on, a little harder, tighter breaking ball just to help offset left-handers a little bit more. But yeah, I think that was kind of the biggest thing for him.
Competitiveness is a guy, you don't worry about that with him. So, I mean, you got guys transitioning to that Friday night role. You have to be a little more confident in his ability to manage that than maybe some of the people in the past that have had to take that jump.
No question. I mean, you're talking about a guy that started the national championship game.
He's all right.
I don't know if you can get a more, you can ask for better experience. And Hunter, and the cool thing about Hunter and Jack and Mason Nichols is their makeup's really good. They're really competitive dudes. They take pride in their preparation. Awesome kids, good teammates. And so that just, aside from what you see on the field from the physical talent, that's the neat thing about coaching those guys.
He can be a bit of your Swiss Army knife. How do you decide what's the best role for Doherty?
Man, that's hard. That's one that we're constantly discussing in this office, because in one breath he's made a jump with his fastball, he's developed a breaking ball, and he could absolutely start. He's really damn good. But the other thing too is you go, okay, if it's on Friday, we're playing Delaware, it's 2-1. Elliott comes out and it's the sixth inning or the seventh inning. You can bring Jack in, the game's over. Like his stuff has gone to a different level, and you add in the experience factor. So I think it's something that coach is still chewing through, still trying to think, and it really comes down to the thought process to him is not whether he's good enough to start. He's good enough to start right now, 100%. It's about trying to figure out, okay, how do we use this group of pitchers in the best way to win weekends, to set us up to win 2 out of 3, to sweep, so on and so forth. And I think that's going to be the challenge earlier, because the flip side of it is you've got some talented young freshman arms. You've got junior college arm. You've got Xavier Rivas, who is a Division II transfer. But you're talking about a lot of guys that don't have any innings, and so it's how do we strategically use those returners who do have the experience to win games, and what's the best formula for that? So the good news is Jack is one of those guys that can do both. We've seen that. It's just trying to figure out how it best fits.
This is an every year question, and it's so cliche, but do you even look around at kind of what's going on with other rosters inside the league? Because I was looking at the SEC West, and you've got the 2022 national champions, the 2021 national champions, 2 teams that tied for 3rd in the country, the team that was 6th in the country, the most talented team in the country potentially in LSU, and then Alabama, who's ranked. I mean, there's not really an off weekend here, Laff. Like, I'm having a hard time coming up with, oh, well, yeah, you got them on Friday, and you can kind of lay off for a minute.
I'd be lying if I said you didn't do that. But then, Clem and I are usually pretty good about this. Clem he always laughs. He says he'll pick up our schedule and he'll look at our SEC weekends. And he goes, how in the world, where do the wins come from? And it speaks to the quality of our league and what you said. But I think you just have to get back and as cliche and coach speak as it sounds, just really get into your guys, and figure them out, because we say it every year, the league keeps getting better and better. Now, I do feel like this is a real thing. The transfer portal, I
Yeah,
think,
that's
is
where I was
stretching
going.
our league. You dump in kids, like you just look at some of the recent transfers. You go from Dollander to Skeens to what's his face from Auburn, Sonny DeShara, Tommy Tanks. You look at the arm from Southern Miss going to Florida. Not to mention, like, even in our own program, Groff, who was one of the best players at Tulane.
Yeah, he said 400 when he got hurt.
Yeah, Calarco's best player at Northwestern. And now, so I think what that does to our league is it separates us. Now, what it means when you get in league play, you just beat the ever-loving hell out of each other, which takes away stomach lining and hair follicles. But yeah, man, the league. It's a bear. It's just a bear.
It's going to get a lot easier. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma's joining will help out a lot, so that's good.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's NIL too. I mean, at the end of the day, when kids are looking for opportunities in multiple ways, it's the programs who care the most, that fill it up, that have the best facilities and all that stuff. Well, it's these 16 programs once you throw Oklahoma and Texas in. I mean, this isn't difficult to figure out that, yes, you're going to have more talent spread around the conference. And I mean, we could be in a situation where you end up having more and more and more teams and super regionals in Omaha and just start passing the damn thing around, it seems like.
Well, and that's the crazy thing. Like, you can be ranked 18th, 19th in the country and be like 5th or 6th in the West. That's crazy, but it speaks to the volume of this league. I mean, you go through it, and man, there's no easy weekends. You go through the rosters, and they do it every single year, where you look at the number of SEC players in the big leagues, SEC players, drafted in the top 10 rounds or top 3 rounds. And there's a drastic separation in our league compared to the rest. And that's not throwing stones. That doesn't mean that other leagues can't have good teams or have teams that win national championships. I'm not saying that. I'm just stating facts. That's just the truth of the matter.
Couple last things. I know you got busy. You got some bullpens and stuff coming up. 2 weeks ago, Taiwan Malone had the big day. Hit all the home runs. Goes 4 for 4, and the swing's not bad. He's obviously a guy who could play Division I baseball anyway, especially if he was just a baseball only guy. But what impresses me about him, and I'm gonna let you speak on it, is how he adapts to you guys' locker room so easily. He just enjoys being out there. He's a dude that, sometimes with those two sport guys, you don't really know what you're getting, and there's some entitlement and whatever. But with Ty, he looks like a dude who just freaking loves it and is enjoying being around whatever he's around at the time.
Big Ty's a stud, man.
Yeah.
I think he's just an awesome kid. Like, he is a really, really good dude. And I think in our locker room that resonates, I mean, across through every player. And then they're looking at him and go, okay, man, he's also a very large human being. And that he's obviously putting in a lot of hard work to, play SEC football. It speaks a lot to what you do as an athlete. But I think just his approach, his personality, the way he carries himself. I mean, he was over here, at times during the fall, hitting when he could. And what he's doing is, man, when I say it's the hardest thing, yeah, being a two-sport athlete, but even more so of being a two-sport athlete and being a hitter. It is a lot easier to be a wide receiver and a pitcher, or a basketball player and a pitcher. When you start talking about hitting, it's the hardest thing in all of sport to do. And you're talking about a guy that, misses out on at bats because he's not playing summer baseball or fall baseball, because he's talented enough to be an SEC football player. And the fact that he can come out and put together at bats, it's really, really impressive. And so that's the thing that I think all the guys see and they respect about him. And he had a tremendous weekend. And there's growing pains, especially when you're not getting at bats on a consistent basis, but you can see the potential there when you see him have days like that.
What's this final week like? I mean, are you shoring up lineups? I mean, I know there's all the obvious things, but I mean, the last 7 days or so, what's kind of going on around there?
Well, the big thing this weekend is, continue to get our guys at bats. I know that probably a lot of your followers would be happy to see it, going through the shift, like, making sure that our play situations and how we rotate through
Until
that.
you shift and then they hit the damn ball where you were supposed to have been. And
then hey man, then your message board is going to blow up. What the heck is Mike doing shifting that guy? No, so there's that. There's getting pitchers' pitch count built up, where they're getting their consistent work in, and just trying to make sure that you dot all the I's and cross all the T's, going all over your team fundamentals from pickoffs and first and third and bunt D's to make sure they're good with that. Even putting together, different stuff like a challenging thing for the pitchers. I shouldn't say challenging. It's just different because of the new rules put in play with the 20-second pitch clock. We've gone to the digital wristbands.
Okay.
So just, adapting to that and getting into the rhythm of the game and the pace of play rules that have come about, it's just typical stuff. But, and coach always says this, and he is, I mean, I say he's the best at it. He's the only one I've known, but he's really good at making sure they feel very prepared by game one. And it's just getting through that checklist and making sure that, all the details are covered.
And you're for the 10-run rule?
Yeah, I am. I know that there's a lot of. I think most of the it was dang near unanimous in the voting. I think, but when you get to that point, like I think everybody's ready to let's call it a day. What are we doing here? And you look at just from using your pitching staff and things like that. It just makes sense. For me, I can understand the baseball purists that say, hey, we want to play 9 innings. And I totally respect that. As a coach, I'm good with it. Like I'm all for, playing the 7 innings or whatever the run rule is and moving on.
There was part of me that thought I would have been okay with it just on travel day, so you don't give as much of a get out of jail free card to the losing team. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah. I had that a little bit of a thought when I saw the rule. Well,
there's also, part of the winning team, and saving pitching there. Like that, I think that people don't think about that, but if you're up and let's say that you're up by 10 and it could be the 10-run rule and you play the 8th and 9th, and now you're trying to throw pitchers that maybe to get them some work or get them some experience. Now they put together a rally. Now you may not bring your guy in, but you may have to get him up and get him hot.
Yeah.
And that sucks, like it's kind of, my whole deal. I didn't see a huge negative with it, and that's me living it every single day. And so it didn't hurt my feelings.
Appreciate it, bud. Let's do it again soon.
All right, man. Great talking to you.
That was Carl Lafferty. Thanks so much for his time tonight on the show. Some breaking news as we shift from baseball to football. I guess this applies to baseball as well. The SEC has announced, as has the Big 12, that Oklahoma and Texas will join the SEC a year early, starting in July 1st of 2024. Oklahoma and Texas, the Sooners, the Longhorns, will join the SEC. It's a year earlier than originally planned. This has been kind of talked about for a while, about what would happen 2023, 2024. I'm reading from my friend Ross Dellinger at Sports Illustrated. He says also that this means that the league is getting closer to a conference scheduling decision as it pertains to football. There's talk about a 1-7, a 3-6. I can tell you it's going to be a 3-6. It's going to be a 3-6. There, a couple of things are being worked out there. Ultimately, it's going to be a 9-game schedule. 3 permanent opponents, 6 rotating opponents. You're going to play every team in the league at least twice, once home and home, every 4 years. What's holding it up is that they're still kind of talking to ESPN about, hey, look, if we're going to give you a 9th game for all 16 teams, there needs to be more revenue. Quoting Ross here, he says, last May, league administrators delayed a vote on the scheduling format at their annual spring meetings because of a host of uncertainties. 1, the timeline for Texas and OU's arrival. 2, college football playoff expansion. 3, tiebreaker procedures. And 4, ESPN revenue. Many of those items are now known. However, while most feel that ESPN will increase the TV revenue, it remains somewhat of a mystery. If more revenue comes, a 9-game model seems like a formality. If more revenue does not come, maybe the league remains at 8, as is the case with much of college sports. A TV's network decision determines the future course of action. So the Big 12 has announced this, so has the SEC. 2024 is going to be a different look for college football. So if you're a nostalgia guy, better embrace the 2023 season, because 2024 is going to be a different deal. 12-team playoff. The Big Ten is going to add USC and UCLA. The SEC is going to add Texas and Oklahoma, and it's going to be different. SEC athletic directors met last week in New Orleans. Texas AD Chris Del Conte was there. So was Oklahoma AD Joe Castiglione. They didn't make any big decisions, but they're getting closer. So it's going to be pretty interesting times in the SEC. Certainly, big news for anybody who follows the SEC that this is going down. He says the SEC should lean in. This is Florida AD Scott Strickland. He's a vocal proponent of the 9-game schedule. He says the SEC should lean into competing against one another as often as possible in all sports, not just a football deal. Those are the games that the fans want to watch or be at. Those are the ones the players want to play. So we'll follow that. Be another big topic next week here on the Oxford Exxon podcast. Speaking of, let's turn to the NFL now. I talked to Neal Stratton, a longtime friend of Inside the League, about the NFL draft, how NIL, pay for play, is changing the draft, and more. So here is Neal Stratton on the MyPerfectFranchise.net hotline. My longtime friend Neal Stratton, Inside the League, kind enough to give of his really busy times. This is like an accountant at tax time. He's slammed, and he's kind enough to spend some time with me. Neal, it's great seeing you as always. Appreciate you being with us.
Great to be back, buddy. Always a pleasure.
So you deal a lot in the draft world, in the agent world, all the All-Star games, the Hula Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, all that stuff's going on, getting ready to go into the draft, the combine's coming up, getting ready to go heavy NFL draft. You and I were talking before we started a little bit. I'd heard some whispers about this, and you live in this world. I don't. I live on the periphery of that world. I guess I'm like a moon around a planet. You're one of the planets. The NIL world, I like to call it pay for play, because that's what it is. College guys are getting paid now, and it's up front. It's changing the draft, right? Especially the back end of the draft. The NFL draft's a 7-round draft. It's changing, what, 5th round on?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a little higher than that, Neal. I think especially if you look at the quarterbacks, the Bo Nixes of the world and some of the others, the kid that went to Pitt last year who has transferred to another school, those guys would be coming out now. They'd be wanting to get paid. Well, they don't have to come out to get paid anymore now. These guys are making 500. I mean, the numbers that I've heard, and I can't verify any of it, but some are getting multi-million-dollar offers to stay. We saw the Ohio State quarterback delay until the last day to declare. That guy could be the number 2 pick in the draft, and he almost didn't come out because he had such a great offer. I don't know numbers, but Ohio State was going to step up to the play big time for him, and then he comes back and he loses nothing. All these, I mean, and you're talking about, now that's the cream of the crop right there. But if you're a day 3 kid, rounds 4 through 7, you can get about $500,000 to go back to a school or change schools, and you don't lose anything. And I think the rookie minimum right now is about $770, something like that. But if let's say you're a 6th rounder, there's no guarantee you make a roster. But if you stay at school, man, you stay there in your comfortable environment, you bank $500,000, maybe $600,000. That's as good as like being an NFL rookie, and you get to stay where you are comfortable, and you don't have to change systems or anything. Or you can go to a different school if you want to, maybe get a better offer, maybe enhance your NFL prospects. It's almost a no lose for these kids. that play the situation right, play it all right. And the bigger schools, Neal, are really taking advantage of it. Some of these kids will put their name out that they're going to the portal. A school will find out and say, "Don't put your name in the portal. We only get 5 visits. We'll bring you in on a visit. We'll pay for it. We'll cover all that stuff. Don't put your name in. We want you, all that kind of stuff. If you like it here, you're here. But don't put your name in." So, I mean, there's so many ways around it, and it's completely unregulated. I mean, it's Dodge City. And schools that said they didn't want to do it, they're getting dragged into it. They don't have any choice. I mean, I've heard about schools sending out emails trying to get more money. I mean, just because it kind of caught them blindsided, and they're trying to haul ass and stay in the race, and it's too late for them because these other schools have 12, 15, 20 million dollars just sitting there in a slush fund, basically.
Yeah, and so much of the money that's in the collectives is going to retain the roster.
Absolutely.
It's like fans, and I get why fans felt this way. I completely understand the mindset because I kind of thought this was what was going to happen too. And I'm not talking about Ole Miss here. It's just in general. I mean, it kind of applies to Ole Miss, but it applies to a bunch of schools. Is that, hey, we raised all this money. Okay, now we're going to go out and buy all the recruits.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, not really. I mean, kind of a little bit here and there, but you're going to use a lot of that money to retain your own roster.
100%.
Because I always call it the tampering portal. You have the portal windows. There's no tampering portal window. The tampering portal's constant. And everybody's going, well, the NCAA, I'm like, the NCAA literally has no ability to say, hey, we're going to cut down on tampering. Because you would just go investigate every single program. I mean, everybody's tampering. Everybody's roster is being tampered with. Literally across the board. Pick your school from Alabama to Wyoming. Everybody is tampering. Everybody's being tampered with. So there's no way they could enforce it. Like you said, it's the wild, wild west, and there's nothing to do about it. There's no way to regulate it, really. So how much of what you're describing is a result of a bunch of guys having that extra year with the COVID year?
I think a lot of it is, and I think that we'll have maybe more sanity in a couple years because those players that had done their 3 or 4 years and don't have that extra year probably go to the pros. I think there's 2 more years before the COVID year washes out of the system. But this year and next year, unless someone does something drastic on the federal level to really curb it, I think next year is going to be just as crazy, if not crazier. I mean, Neal, I've heard stories of an agency, this is an NFL agency, brokering a deal for a player. And then at the last moment, they need another $5,000 for something. I don't know what it was. And so the school said, okay, where are you? The guy said, I'm in a city in Texas. Okay. They said, okay, where can we'll meet you? Then the guy said, hey, listen, I got COVID. I'm shut down in my hotel room. He said, that's even better. We got coaches in that city. You're going to get a knock on your door. The agent says, I need $5,000. $5,000, no problem. You're going to knock on your door. Don't answer for 30 seconds. He gets the knock. He waits 30 seconds. He opens the door. There's an envelope with $5,000 cash in it. It sounds like James Bond stuff. I mean, it's crazy. If SMU just could have waited, 30 years, 40 years, they'd be the leader in this stuff instead of getting the death penalty.
They were cutting edge and they didn't know it. But everybody did it. It was now it's just the quiet parts out loud, and
yeah, pretty much.
And we call it NIL. It's not NIL. It's pay for play. You're not paying. It's not name, image, license. You're getting paid to play. You're getting a salary.
Nobody's sending tweets now. Nobody's doing appearances. No one's doing commercials. None of that. None of that.
No, they don't want to do it. I mean,
hell no, no way. That's real work. This is strictly pay to play. You're right.
We did 3 shows last year. I did them. My daughter Caroline, thank God, produced them with players. And, I sold advertising. They were sponsored. Players did the shows. And now I think people are like, are you going to do shows again this year? I'm like, no, probably not. They're like, why? I'm like, well, number one, I don't know that I'm getting anything out of them. I don't know that I'm making enough out of them. By the time I paid for art and I paid for her to produce and all that stuff, I wasn't like throwing money in the air at the end of it. The kids don't really want to do them. They do them because they're obligated, but they don't want to do them. And so, right. It's, and then now that what's the incentive to do a show? They're going to get the same amount of money to do nothing.
Exactly.
If I'm going to pay you, if I say, hey, Neal, I tell you what, I'll pay you $10,000 to work or $10,000 not to work. Not to work.
That's cool. Pretty easy.
Yeah, that's the deal. So Yeah, it's just
And now the pressure is on the school to go find them something that they don't have to do that will get them paid. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, it's just where we're going with college sports is so silly. Now they want so it's trickled down to the high school kids. The high school kids are like, yeah, I'll do an interview, but I got to get paid. And I'm like, no, I'm not paying you to tell me that Ole Miss felt like home. That's cool. I'm not going to do it. It's going to have to be something more profound than that I can turn into money for me. And when I was 17,
the big NFL agents are recruiting high school now. Used to, it was 10 years ago, they couldn't recruit a player unless they're 3 years out of high school. Now they're recruiting them in college, in high school.
So how does that work? It's like, hey, we're going to advise you. Or are they getting cuts of the money? I mean, how does that work? Because if they're technically representing the player, he's no longer an amateur.
You're right. I think it's a kind of a one hand washes the other thing. You're going to be my guy whenever the time comes, right? That kind of thing. I mean, again, I don't know. It's kind of a state by state thing, how the rules work and all that kind of stuff. But I think to some degree, I mean, if you're putting yourself there as an NIL guy, number one, you don't have to be licensed. And number two, I don't think the player jeopardizes eligibility in any way, shape, or form. So as long as they are putting themselves out as working on the NIL side, they can do whatever they want to.
And now here's the other thing that the smarter coaches are doing. The smarter coaches are reaching out to those agents, advisors, and saying, hey, these are the guys that I really feel like we need to win at Wyoming State. Can you go get them? And then the agent goes and tries to kind of broker a deal with the collective for the player. It's so different than it was just 5 years ago when, hey, you went into the living room and you had to wow mom, or hey, well, this is the greatest.
It's not recruiting; it's shopping now.
It's exactly right. It is very similar to what happens for an NFL free agent, where the agent goes out and kind of brokers some deals, and then at the very end, the player flies into Cleveland or Cincinnati or Houston or wherever and tours the facility, and the deal's kind of already been structured, and he just has to decide whether that's where he wants to go or not, right? I mean, that's what's happening with college recruiting. It's wild.
Well, the smarter schools, I know a friend who was in NFL scouting. He was at an SEC school. He built a bank of about 300, 400 players ready to go when the portal started. I don't know if he knew that those guys were even going to enter the portal, but he knew they wanted him and they were ready for him if they got a crack at him. Strengths, weaknesses, how they fit in the program, grades, majors, the whole 9 yards. I mean, he built a draft board just like an NFL team would, but this is for active college players. And I think that's how all schools are doing it now.
Let's talk about the draft a little bit. It's coming up. You've seen some of these all-star games. We're about to do the combine and the pro days and stuff, and that's going to change stuff. Obviously, everyone's talking quarterback. I'll start here. I had Chris Easterling covers the Browns on. So we're talking quarterbacks, talking about Deshaun Watson, that kind of thing. I asked him, I said, I know you don't cover the Bears, but if you had to guess what the Bears do at number one, what would you guess? And he said they'll trade the pick. I'll ask you, a lot of agents, you're kind of starting to see this. The Chicago Bears sitting in a pretty spot at number one. Twofold question. In your opinion, are they in on Justin Fields? Is he their guy? Are they wed to him at this point? Or is it possible that they take a quarterback and try to trade Fields? What do you anticipate the Bears doing at number one?
I just think with a defensive-oriented head coach there, I think they're trying to explore other options. I think these days you don't really find out what you have with a quarterback until year 2 or year 3. And almost every player goes through that learning curve. They're already on the other side of that with Fields. And I'm not trying to say that Fields is, he's not Patrick Mahomes, but he's a playmaker and he does things you can't coach. Given that, I think you could see them maybe keep the pick. I mean, Jalen Carter is an exciting player. There are not a lot of people talking about him. And, there's some things he's going to have to work through, but he's a guy that would he would look great in the middle of that defense. And if they've already got a quarterback and then he becomes a dominant Warren Sapp type difference maker, that could make a real difference for him in stopping the run in a division that's still kind of wide open. It's not Green Bay and the rest of them anymore. So I could see him go defense there. I could see him keep the pick. Now we'll know more after the combine. We'll know more after March on whether someone's completely fallen in love with Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, someone else, and is willing to pay a king's ransom. But I don't think the Bears have to be any pressure to, and it wouldn't surprise me if they kept it.
You mentioned CJ Stroud, you mentioned Bryce Young, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson. These are all guys that get talked about as first 10 picks in the draft. You've seen these guys. I know you'll study them more, and you'll talk to people who study them more here in the next couple months. So your opinion might change between now and late April. But as of today, February the 9th, as we record this, any of those guys wow you? Do you watch any of those guys and go, that dude is a franchise quarterback? He's a Patrick Mahomes, a Joe Burrow, a Josh Allen. He's the kind of guy that is going to make a franchise a contender for the next 10 to 12 years.
I don't know. I know there are a lot of detractors for Young. I know he doesn't have picture perfect size. He doesn't have all those things, but I think we're in a league now. And I know every time I come on the show, I talk about it, but the rules favor the offense so much. And if you've got a guy who's got the software and can make a decision quickly and get the ball out quickly, he doesn't have to be that guy that's going to get crushed by an edge rusher and still be able to get up. Most of the time, they don't have to worry about those big hard hits or taking a shot in the legs or taking a shot in the face mask or whatever. I think that favors a Bryce Young. I like CJ Stroud too, just because I feel like he's put up some big games on the big stage. I think those are both pretty good things they've got for him. Now, I am not a Levis guy. If you follow the SEC and you saw his performance, to me, it still counts what you do on the field. And there are too many games that he just did not impress me. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he gets in the right system. Those are the guys I think. And now Anthony Richardson is an interesting guy. He's got tools. He's got he's kind of a poor man's Lamar Jackson. But I think one thing that doesn't get enough discussion is, do you have someone in the building who can develop a quarterback? I'm a Saints guy. If the Saints were taking a quarterback, and there's been discussion of that, obviously, do I have faith Pete Carmichael can develop that guy? Do I have faith that they have anyone there who will be patient, who will correct him when he's wrong, who will build him up, build his confidence, or whip him down if that's what he needs? I don't think so. And I think that's a factor in all this. So do I see guys that are clay that could be molded? Yeah, I think Young and Stroud and Richardson to some degree. But it's so hard to sit here and say these guys are future NFL stars. I mean, look how much the Niners gave up for Trey Lance, and he may not even be their starter next year. 7th rounder might be. So there's just, I'm not trying to give you a non-answer, but there's just so many factors that go into it that it's hard to say.
Yeah, I've told the story. Ole Miss, Kentucky were playing, and I guess that was October 1st or somewhere around there. And I was talking to the head of scouting for a franchise not to be named, who was there for the game. And I said, "Are you here for Levis?" And he goes, "God, no. I mean, if we're drafting quarterback, we're in trouble." And I said, "What do you think of him?" And he goes, "I don't know. Look at him." And he's down, look down at the press box. I'm like, he looks like $1 gazillion. I mean, he looks great. He looks like an NFL quarterback. And he's just slinging the ball around in warm-ups. And you're like, dude. And he goes, exactly. He goes, that's what happens. He goes, the results on the field don't match that. And he goes, but here's what we all do. He goes, I'm not criticizing. We all do this. We all take 3 months where there's no football. The Chiefs and the Eagles are going to play on Sunday night, Neal. They're going to play a game. Someone's going to win. Someone's going to lose. And then on Monday morning, all these organizations are going to meet, except for the Chiefs and the Eagles, and they'll do it on Tuesday. All these other organizations are going to meet on Monday, and they're going to sit around the proverbial conference table. They're going to have a coffee and a protein bar, and they'll talk about the game for a minute. And then they're going to turn the page, and they're going to start talking about the draft. And they're going to, with no football to play and no football to watch, you're going to have the underwear games, and you're going to have some meetings and stuff. But for the most part, you don't have any more football. No one will play another football game before the draft, and they are going to overthink the draft because that's what everybody does. You have 3 months to meet, and all these different people that have opinions, and you're going to get confused, and guys are going to talk about it. And Will Levis is going to wow people at a pro day because he's going to look like he's going to be in the best shape of his life. He's going to look amazing. He's got a great arm, and he's going to make all these throws. He's a charismatic kid, and someone's going to take him super high, and it's going to be a big gamble. And then Anthony Richardson's the other one that you mentioned. He's got all these physical tools, and there's a couple of games, Utah, couple of games that come to mind where he was awesome. And then I'm like, did you watch the Vanderbilt game? I did. I mean, did you watch them play some of these other teams where dude didn't show? Now, was that Billy Napier? Was that Dan Mullen? Was that offensive line sucked? He didn't have weapons. What was that? But he's going to be a guy that his pro day and at the combine, I mean, he's beautiful. And he's going to put up he's going to do deals with his body that everyone's going to go, oh my God, let me mold that piece of clay. And it's going to be the same thing it always is. So it's what makes the draft fun is that all of these people who are paid a lot of money, someone's going to get it right and someone's going to get it bad wrong. It's absolutely going to happen in the draft.
I mean, in today's game, teams get so fewer games to evaluate a quarterback now, you know?
Yeah.
And I keep going back to Lance. Lance had a great year on the 1AA level, maybe two. Then he played 1 year that COVID year. He played one game that COVID year against Central Arkansas, and he gets drafted 4 overall. Is that what? I mean, the Niners traded up to get him, some way up there. Yeah. Now we're 2 years in. He sat 1 year, then he broke his ankle. They still don't know what they have. I mean,
no, they were about to go with the 7th round guy until he got hurt in the NFC Championship game, who was about to become. I mean, if Brock Purdy plays that game in a hypothetical world, they win. And Brock Purdy's preparing to play in the Super Bowl on Sunday. Brock Purdy's the quarterback at the 49ers. And he probably is anyway.
And that's the thing. Purdy was he a 4-year starter at Iowa State? Something like that.
Yeah, he played a ton of football at Ames. Yes.
And it's funny because here's what's working against Brock Purdy. You become less sexy sometimes the more you play.
Because you see weaknesses. You can pick stuff apart. You're like, well, he doesn't do this and he doesn't do that, you know?
Right. Look at Anthony Richardson. Nobody really knows. You hit with an Anthony Richardson, look what you got. But if you don't, and you may have nothing.
You use the 9th pick of the draft, for example, on an Anthony Richardson, and if he doesn't deliver, that's failure.
Yeah.
There's no other word for it. That's failure.
And if you get thrown in the fat early, and more and more often that's happening for quarterbacks, you may get 1, maybe 2 seasons, and they're moving on if you're not lighting the lamp for them. So it's just such a disposable league now, and it's just hard to evaluate these players.
You mentioned New Orleans. Derek Carr's gone in there a couple of times. It looks like there's conversation about Derek Carr for a 3rd round pick. You're a Saints guy. Saints quarterback play last year was average on a good day. Does Derek Carr change the needle for them? And if you're New Orleans, is that a deal that you almost kind of have to make?
I don't know if I go 3rd round. I mean, it all kind of hinges on the contract. I mean, the Raiders signed that insane deal, and they've got 6 days to move him, something like that. I think the 15th is when that activates. So if they can get that deal whittled down, I think you do. The thing about it is, I'm kind of excited about next year's quarterback class. And if they commit to a Derek Carr and pay him anything, I mean, if you're looking at what's the rate for a guy like that, 35, 40 a year, something around there.
Mm-hmm. If
they can get it to where they can get out of that deal pretty easily, then I think I do. But if they're going to have to sign something where they give him a signing bonus that basically welds him to the team, kind of a Michael Thomas situation for 2 or 3 years, I don't do it, because I think I suck it up, try to find someone to patch the leak for a year, and then I take my chances next year. But it's tempting to do because the NFC South is there for the taking. You don't have a quarterback that anyone's excited about on any of the teams with Tom Brady retired. So you're thinking if you bring in a Derek Carr and you're just league average there with the defensive out that Dennis Allen puts on the field, you got a chance. So it's tempting, but it all kind of hinges on how long you have to commit yourself in my mind, to Derek Carr.
You piqued my interest, so I'm guessing that a lot of the people who are listening to this and watching this, you piqued theirs as well. When you say you're excited about next year's quarterback class, who are the people in it that kind of have your antenna up?
Well, my kid, who's even a bigger hoodat than I am, wants the Saints to go out and go 0-17 so they can get Caleb Williams. But I mean, I think Quinn Ewers is an exciting player too.
Yeah, I do too.
At Texas, and there's one more that I can't think of off the top of my head. But there are three guys that look like real franchise type quarterbacks in the next year.
Williams would be the first pick in this year's draft if he were eligible, right?
I think so, by a long shot. Yeah, just the tools, the run pass combination, and the elusiveness and all those things make him pretty exciting.
It's kind of like the NBA. People have been talking about Victor Wembanyama for years. He would have been the first pick in last year's draft, and probably the draft before that when he was 16. And so you've got the Spurs and others that are kind of tanking a little bit, trying to position themselves to maybe land him. The Rockets. All right, last couple of minutes here with you. From these All-Star games that we've just watched, anybody jumped up as a fast stock riser who maybe went into the All-Star games that everybody wasn't really talking about, and now there's a lot of whispers about him?
The one name that I keep hearing is Spears, the running back from Tulane. I think he had a really nice Senior Bowl, got some recognition for his practice week. He's the one I think. I think there were some tackles that looked pretty good. This is a rather deep tackle class, and I think there were a couple guys who really kind of cemented where they were. I don't have names as much. I didn't get to I wish I could watch a practice more than I do, but there's just so many people there in Mobile. It's just kind of a renewal of acquaintances and talk business and all those kind of things. So it's a little harder. But those are the names that I would say that's the one player that comes to mind immediately that really kind of I thought showed out there and helped himself.
I heard some rumors that Cincinnati. I heard rumors that Cincinnati has kind of started looking at Spears and gone, "Ooh, it might be a cheaper way. Let us get out of the mixing thing, free up some money, get rid of a headache."
Yeah,
maybe even improve at the position.
No one's more disposable than running backs these days.
Yeah.
Now, the Senior Bowl is also kind of interesting because they're kind of in a battle with the Shrine Bowl now, and the NFL's kind of put its chips on the Shrine Bowl. So it's not it's still a clear-cut winner as far as talent, but with the NIL situation, the COVID year situation, and the competition from the Shrine Bowl, it was you didn't see the glaring, gleaming, obvious first rounders there. Were the first rounders? Yes, but it wasn't a year where you're like, wow, look at all this talent. And I think that's true of all the All-Star games. It's more and more players are looking at their options and they're fearing injuries and they've got more to lose. It's just harder to make that sale sometimes. And as a guy who really believes in All-Star games, that's hard for me because, you want to see guys do it on the field, obviously. And I think Jim and Eric and all those people they're really having to battle to get players to commit to it. And it's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. And then you have guys that come out early and, it's just like you said, there's a lot of people in their ears that are advising them on what to do. You see guys opting out of bowl games and all of that stuff, and a lot of decisions to make with a lot of money on the line. And then you throw in the prospect of guys hanging out in college a year longer or getting in the portal and jumping places. It's just a fascinating landscape that it's rapidly changing. It's hard to explain to people because I'm not even sure I completely grasp it. And it's something I talk about every day, but the landscape changes so rapidly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, no doubt about it. You look at mock drafts, the top 10, 15 picks in the first round, and every one of them, none of them are seniors. Nobody makes it to that last year. And I'm not even talking about senior eligibility wise. They're not even making, they're still, they haven't even graduated and they're leaving. And I guess that is not a new problem per se, but it's just more prominent than ever these days.
All right, last thing. I've kept you longer than I said I would, but Super Bowl 57 is on Sunday. It's the Eagles, the Chiefs. It's not a game that has me excited. Sunday's going to roll around, and I guess I'll make myself watch it. Or I'm not particularly. I guess I was really hoping the Bengals would get back. That's probably a lot of it. Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, all that stuff. What are you looking for in the game? Who do you think wins? What kind of game do you think it is?
I like the Eagles' defensive line against the Chiefs' offensive line, and if you can't, and as magic as Patrick Mahomes is, and I take nothing away from him, if you can't give him that pocket and make him feel comfortable back there, I think he's in trouble. And I'm a big Jalen Hurts guy. I've been a Jalen Hurts guy, and
Yeah, I know you have.
I think he's going to be a factor for them. I don't know what's the line. Do you know?
Yeah, it's 1.5. The Eagles are a 1.5 point favorite.
Is that right? Okay, I thought the Chiefs would be a favorite. I think the Eagles win. I think it's close. I don't think it's a shootout. I think it's probably in the. Over under probably 50 or less. I think it'll be an entertaining game. I'm kind of like you. I'm not super excited about this matchup, but I think the Eagles have a good chance to win this game. That's my prediction is Eagles in a close one, I guess.
I said last thing. One more thing. I'm curious, just your barometer on the league as we turn the page after the Super Bowl to free agency to the draft. Do you anticipate a lot of big moves involving free agents? Do you anticipate it being kind of quiet in that regard as people wait for the draft, or what do you sort of expect?
I think it'll be interesting. I think there are enough. One thing that I thought was really maybe an undersold story of this offseason is were there 16 offensive coordinators that were fired? Something like that?
There's a bunch. I don't know the number.
That's a lot of change. And I think all those teams are going to want to, whoever comes in is going to want to, make their mark. They're going to want to craft their team in some way. To me, that lends itself to some interesting changes, not just to the quarterback position, but at other positions too, to mold these teams and make their mark. I mean, the theme of today is not for long. You don't have very long to be successful. And if you're not showing signs quickly, you're out of there. So I think it could be interesting because so many teams are changing their offense to look more modern or to just look like it didn't look last year. And I think the seeds are there for an interesting offseason.
I know you're busy. Get back to it. Really appreciate you taking some time for us. Appreciate it.
It's always fun, Neal. I appreciate you having me on, buddy, as always. I hope everyone has a great time on the Super Bowl and in the coming weeks, free agency, the draft. It's an exciting time to be a football fan.
Talk to you soon.
You bet.
Thanks to Neal for his time. We've been buddies for, 2 decades now, maybe longer. Next up, I spoke with Chris Easterling of the Akron Beacon Journal, also Gannett, Ohio. Chris covers the Cleveland Browns. So we discussed Deshaun Watson, life on an NFL beat, all things NFL, including his Super Bowl pick both this year and next year as well. So here's Chris. Chris Easterling covers the Cleveland Browns for the Akron Beacon Journal, also Gannett, Ohio. Chris and I have sort of connected via social media. Social media is typically a bad thing, but in this case, it's been a good thing. Made some friends, made some contacts. I think, Chris, it was with some of the Chris Kiffin stuff back when he left the Browns to come to Ole Miss for like 48 hours, and then he went back to the Browns. I think we sort of communicated a little bit back then, and so I have followed your work on your first year with covering the Cleveland Browns there in the AFC North. So thanks for giving us some time here.
Yeah, I can't thank you enough. Enjoy the podcast with you and Chase. So it's an honor to be on with you guys.
So I don't even know where to start. I guess I'm going to start here because you're based in Ohio. You've been in Ohio pretty much your whole life, although you went to University of Kentucky. We might ask you about the Cats in a minute. But obviously, we were taping this on a Wednesday late morning, about 12 hours or so after LeBron James became the NBA's all-time career leading scorer, which is an incredible accomplishment the more you think about it. I mean, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a great player, and he passed Kareem on Tuesday night against my Oklahoma City Thunder. You saw LeBron as a high schooler. You've seen LeBron James before he was even on the national radar. When you see last night happen, from your unique perspective, can you kind of give us some perspective of how big of a deal this guy is in the part of the country in which you live?
I don't know if there is anybody bigger in this part of the country. LeBron is Akron. at this point, not just because of basketball, but the off the court things. I mean, it's he may have left Cleveland a while ago to go to LA and before that to Miami, but he has never left Akron. And so to put where LeBron is held in this area, to put it in perspective, I don't know if there is something. I mean, I don't know if you can, because I mean, this area doesn't, I mean, there's been great play people, great, individuals. I mean, Steph Curry was born in Akron. So, but LeBron is just nobody of that magnitude is from here. And to see him do that, and to think back to, remember watching him as I don't want to say scrawny, but he wasn't that jacked when he was a freshman at St. Vincent St. Mary. To see him go from that and just hear high school coaches whisper about him.
Yeah.
Oh, St. V's got this kid. You got to see this kid. To now the NBA's all-time leading scorer. It's I saw a colleague of mine just post on Facebook this morning. He goes, I'm legitimately emotional watching this, because I saw this kid this has been my whole life watching this kid. And I'm like, I don't know if I was emotional, but there is a step back and really take it all in, because while you weren't directly involved in it, you followed the journey. You were there from the beginning and to now, and it's like nothing I've ever experienced with a sports figure, because I don't think it's possible unless you get in at that, unless you're a family member or a close friend or coach of that individual. I don't think it's possible to have that kind of journey, step-by-step journey that this area has had with LeBron from childhood to that last night.
You were telling me about a game where he played at Massillon when he was at St. Vincent St. Mary's, and the game was at Massillon, so obviously it was a road game for LeBron's team, and he has this play that the student section just goes nuts, and it's against their team. But this guy, I mean, I said this on the Wednesday Oxford Exxon podcast. When your nickname is the chosen one, think about that for a minute, like the chosen one,
right?
Not some star name or whatever, but the chosen one. I mean, in other words, the one. I mean, you're rarefied air. It's so hard to live up to that, and he's done it. I mean,
he's surpassed it. I think
he truly has,
because look, he's got his flaws. I mean, we all have. I mean, like everybody else, he's human, but we're nitpicking. Some of those flaws that may be based on your individual perception of his social work,
sure,
whatever.
Yeah,
I mean,
your political views, your socioeconomic views, all of those things might get in the way.
Might color where you see a flaw.
Right.
So that's through the eye of the beholder. But I mean, he's, like I say, he's given so much back. My late father was rarely impressed by anybody, but he was always impressed by LeBron, because he said, you can see where his heart is, because you can see he never turned his back on, like I said, he never turned his back on Akron, never turned his back on, quote unquote, his people, the youth of Akron. And he's back at St. V regularly. He does a lot. He has a school in Akron he's founded, and he just, that, as much as anything he's done on the court, I keep going back to it, but here in Ohio, in this part of Ohio specifically, that means a lot, because look, he did that in LA wearing the Lakers uniform. And there's a segment of Northeast Ohio that they're the back and forth, the Cleveland to Miami, to Cleveland to LA, may have may have rubbed him the wrong way, but the fact that he has never completely left Northeast Ohio and specifically Akron is the thing that's, I think, keeps him so popular in this area beyond the basketball.
Yeah, and he did come back and win a title. That probably, I mean, you get
well, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
championship.
That's the, I think that's what made the move to LA so tolerable to a lot of people, is that at the end of the day, he promised, I'm bringing you a title to Cleveland. I'm going to bring a title to Cleveland. And I don't know if people completely understand. Well, I'm sure Ole Miss baseball fans, Ole Miss fans can speak to it with the baseball national title meant. For Cleveland fans and Northeast Ohio sports fans, that 2016 title, I mean, that was like it was like they exorcised the demons. It was, and I can remember that night. It was like nothing else. And it was like that night, LeBron James, from that point on, LeBron James probably could do no wrong in a lot of people's eyes.
Sure. All right, let's switch to the NFL. It's a big Super Bowl week. We'll get to your Super Bowl thoughts in a minute. I'm sure you probably have some. You've followed the league all this year, but this was your first year as a full-time NFL beat writer. I got a taste of NFL beat writing in my Mobile days. I was covering the Saints, but I was also covering the SEC as a whole. I was covering other stuff. So my Saints beat writing consisted more of some sort of a feature, a couple of notebooks, an advance, and then game day coverage. My Sundays were just wow. But the rest of it, I didn't get the full taste of NFL beat writing because I was covering other things. You got that. Take me into the world of an NFL beat writer for a week covering a franchise like Cleveland that is their fan base is pretty damn passionate.
Mm-hmm. I think it's mentally tiring more than physically tiring, because it's just like, how do I give something, you've talked about access. We get access Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, on a typical Sunday week. Those are the days we have the open locker room, but you need people in the locker room. And that's been part of the problem this year. Was we get guys that they bring certain guys to the podium. Deshaun Watson, the quarterback, whether it was Jacoby or Brissett or Deshaun Watson, Amari would come, Nick Chubb, a couple others, Myles Garrett. But in terms of the periphery, there were times when it was a ghost town in there. And
is that because they knew that's when it was open and they didn't want to talk to you guys? Or
I think so. I think part of it was it's a younger roster. And, we think back to the last few years of the way it's been with media. A lot of these guys went through college programs. A lot of them are SEC guys, LSU.
Yeah.
And so you're not put out there. I mean, you can be hidden and you can go a whole career without talking to the media more than 2 times. I mean, depending on who you.
Yeah, depending on who you are and how much you toe the company line. And, it's really interesting. And I've had this, I've always, Chris, you and I are about to go off into a journalism thing for a minute. And there will be some people that are like, talk football, and some people will be fascinated with this. So to those of you who are fascinated, you're welcome. And to those of you who hate me right now, I'm sorry. We'll get back to football in a minute. But I've had this argument with media relations people, not just at Ole Miss, but elsewhere. Because I've always promised that I would never, ever, ever complain about access. I won't do it. I won't do it. I've had coaches call me. Hugh Freeze did this, to his credit, called me and said, how do you want to do this? How do you want access to work?
Right.
Tommy Tuberville, when I was covering Auburn, walked into the room one day and we were like, dude, you've got to limit some of our access because we can't work. We're constantly at practice. And so, I mean, I've had those conversations, but I've never once picked up the phone and gone, this is not doable. We don't get to see anything. We don't get to talk to anybody. My job is to figure it out. If you don't let me talk to anybody, I got to figure out what I'm writing. I'll figure it out. And I've always sort of, if anything, if I'm being honest, I've always viewed that as a strength of mine. And so when I know that opponents, the people that I compete against, are bitching about it, then that means they can't think of how to create content, and I can. And so it's advantage me. And, I don't, I'm not all walking, talking advantage. So when I have an advantage, I'm going to hang on to it. That said, I have told people in media relations and such, I'm like, you guys are not doing a service to these kids. And especially now in this NIL era, you're really not doing a service to these kids, because you need to let them get their story out, because there might be a business that wants to get involved with them. But you want the fans to know them as something other than number 71 or number 12 or whatever.
Right.
And the only way to really do that to the masses is to let them talk to people like us.
Yeah.
And yet they now go through high school where they don't talk to the recruiting people. And I get it, because there's a gazillion of them, and a lot of them are really creepy. So they don't do that. They figured out they can control their own message with social media. And then they get to college, and it's like you said, freshmen don't talk to the media. And then they become sophomores, and we get them this 3 times a year or whatever. And it's in front of a podium with people asking stuff. Nobody ever gets a chance to really talk to them about, hey, everybody's got a story, I mean,
yeah.
And we don't ever get to that place. And so then they become pros, those that are fortunate enough to become professional players. And I've always told them, I mean, those guys are going to get into a locker room in Pittsburgh or Dallas or Phoenix or wherever, and they're going to have a bunch of professional journalists, guys who've covered the league, women who've covered the league for a long time, who don't care about school loyalty and all of that stuff. They're looking for stories, and they're writing, and they're not fans, and they're not going to, they're professionals. They're doing their jobs, and these kids aren't going to be prepared to talk to those people, and you're doing a disservice with them. And I think you're starting to see that in the pro level. Guys are showing up in NFL locker rooms, and they don't know how to deal with media. And then I see the guys who were given a ton of experience with it. I'll give you an example. Mike Hilton played at Ole Miss. Yeah. And was kind of one of the voices of the program, and got to know media guys. And he's there, and it was in Pittsburgh for years, and now he's with the Bengals, and he's a guy that the media go to. He's a go-to guy, and he's super at it. And the day's going to come with Mike. It might not come for a while, because he's just defied the odds, but the day's going to come when Father Time's going to say, hey, Mike, you can't play football anymore. And he's going to have a media career if he wants one. He'll be able to do a lot of different things. And so it's just a disservice that's happening to these guys when they go into the NFL. And the truth is, they're ducking you guys, not because they don't like you, even though I think they're told not to like you.
Right.
They don't even know you, but they're scared of you because they're not prepared for it. You're preparing them for football, but you're not preparing them for a big part of what comes around football, which is dealing with fans, dealing with media, enhancing your brand as a player in this limited window of time that you're a player, enhancing your brand as a player so that you can capitalize to the maximum on your potential and your earning potential.
And even some of the guys that came in the last couple of years, well, this past year was the first time we've had open locker room since COVID.
Right.
So, 2020, 2021. So if you're in your third year, which there's a lot of guys in this league, in that locker room, a Grant Delpit, a Greg Newsome, guys like that, who their entire careers has either been the college, fortress mentality, or in, the
it's a great
the
word.
Zoom, virtual world where, they don't have, hey, can we get you for 5 minutes on a Zoom to talk on a what? And like you say, yeah, the podium guys are great. I appreciate some of the because it makes it easier. My God, I couldn't imagine, crowding around Deshaun Watson's locker after,
Right.
but at the same time, I look back, I was going through some of my stuff the last couple of weeks from the year, kind of assessing myself. And my best stuff was stuff that, hey, pull Kellen Mond aside, or Josh Dobbs, or Anthony Schwartz, or somebody like that. Just get them off to the side and talk to them, and get, where you can flush things out and get the story, like you say. And, I found a lot of my stuff was rookies or backup quarterbacks, or third string quarterbacks, I should say, because, or, offensive linemen, and because those are the guys that would actually be at their locker more often than not, beyond their, if they had a time at the podium. The one guy who maybe was different, and this is, I'm getting off on a tangent here, I apologize, but
it's all good. It's one of the great things about podcasts.
As an SEC country, I knew about Amari Cooper. I mean, I knew about him at Alabama. I knew about him with the Raiders and the Cowboys. I have never gained a greater appreciation for both player and person, for an individual, quite like I did Amari over the last several months, because you watch him on the field and everything that I hear Tyler talk about him, and everything Tyler talks about him, it's like, oh, I see it. The dedication to the craft, but also the professionalism. Amari's not the most, I don't think Amari really likes to talk. I think he comes across, I want to say, introverted a little bit, but at the same time, when he talks, he'll give you something. Sometimes you have to listen, but he'll give you something, win or lose. He's at his locker after a game talking, and he talked after their next to last game in Washington, actually suburban Maryland, but he talked about, he's been playing with a core muscle injury over the last month of the season that really impacted his speed. Really, and I think it really impacted part of the development of Deshaun, integrating him back into the offense. And he talked, it was me and another reporter, we're talking to his locker, and he's talking about playing hurt. And he goes, I used to not want to play hurt. I wouldn't play hurt. And he said, Nick Saban told him, you gonna play, or I got somebody else, I'll play over you. But you playing at 70% is better than this player at 100%. So what we gonna do here? And he said that message resonated, and that he's brought that to the NFL and into his work ethic. And that was just, it's like one of those things, you're just in this, this post-game scrum. It wasn't really a scrum, but it was just a couple of us, but
yeah,
it's just such a, for him, a star to a degree, in that people know who Amari Cooper is, acknowledging, yeah, I used to not be this tough, but now I am. And, again, getting to know these players and having individual conversations. I don't know if you get that before.
You don't. Two things that stick out from that. One is it's the part of the Saban program that he doesn't get enough credit for, frankly, is that he tells kids as recruits that he'll get you ready for the NFL, and then by God, they do it. I mean, they get their guys ready for the NFL. I mean, it sounds cliche when they say, hey, what you have to do at Alabama is you have to buy in, you have to be part of the process. But if you do it, we're going to do our part, and we're going to get you ready for the league. And frankly, and Kirby's starting to do that at Georgia, but that's the challenge, right? If you're Brian Kelly, if you're Lane Kiffin, if you're Mark Stoops, whoever, I mean, frankly, that is your challenge. You've got to get that reputation. Right. You've got to get the reputation of, we get guys ready for the league. I
think there's two programs that do that. Nick at Alabama, and you just really have to look at the numbers. And this is not geographic bias here, but I think it's evident with Ohio State.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
I mean, those are the two programs. Those are the gold standards in terms of, and like you say, Kirby is getting there with Georgia, but those are the two programs that you just cannot deny. When their players get to the league, by God, they're probably, it's on the player if they're not ready to go, because by God, most of those players will give you something.
And those players are made accessible to media in Columbus, in Tuscaloosa, in Athens. They are, well, Athens is a little less, but they're working on it. But in Columbus and Tuscaloosa, it's part of the deal. And guys get more familiar with media. And, you know, I remember, wasn't that long ago, there were guys that I covered at Ole Miss that knew me by my first name.
Right.
Knew who I was. You know, when I say we had developed a personal relationship, it wasn't like it was like, hey, let's go hang out and have a beer or anything like that. But it was more like, you know, I could say, hey, tell your parents I said hello. You know, or somebody might say, you know, how are your girls or whatever. They knew there was more to me than just the guy that covered Ole Miss, and I knew there was more to them than the guy who played safety for Ole Miss or linebacker for Ole Miss or whatever. And I don't know that today at the college level, I don't know that these guys know who the hell any of us are. And so
you're just another face. They especially coming up through the, like you say, through the recruiting car wash, where it's just one. I mean, it's a multitude of voices, a multitude of faces that you're dealing with. I mean, I'm sure there are a couple of them that get somewhat close to these guys, but it can't be nearly the percentage that maybe in the old days. I age myself here at age 45.
But well, I'm the same way. But I mean, just it's, you know, that's going full circle on this part of the conversation. That's the part that I think they do tell them in Tuscaloosa and in Columbus is, hey, look, if you get into the league, when you're in the league, and I mean, you know, you play on Sunday, you're off on Monday and Tuesday. When you show up on Wednesday to the interview, to the locker room in Las Vegas or Los Angeles or wherever the case may be, there's going to be writers in the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to ask you about stuff, and you can either be standoffish with them and develop that reputation, or you can be professional. You get to decide, but it's going to happen. They're going to be there.
Mm-hmm. I think of, you mentioned, you know, getting to know them personally. I mean, I don't think we ever completely get to know these guys personally, but I'll give you an anecdote from this past season where, you know, you're just having a conversation with it. You know, it's me and another guy from AP up here. We're just sitting, you know, the locker room's kind of empty, and Jacoby Brissett is just sitting in his locker. This is before this is before his final start. This is right after Thanksgiving. And, you know, we're just chatting with him. We're asking him how his Thanksgiving went. What'd you do for Thanksgiving? Well, did you go to someplace for dinner? It's like, yeah, I went to Waffle House, which leads to me, you know, being, you know, having spent some time in the South. I'm like, Waffle House. I'm like, so what's your order? What you go to? And he, you know, he's like, oh, this, that. He goes, I never had Waffle House till 3 a.m. in Gainesville, Florida. Like 19. He goes, I never had it before till Gainesville, Florida either. But, you know, it's just those little conversations more than anything that where they at least get comfortable and they realize you're not the enemy. He's a human and I'm a human, and two humans can have an interaction and it doesn't have to be confrontational.
Because it's rarely confrontational. I mean, that's the thing, is it's, if you think about what we're trying to do as writers, I'd much rather tell your story. And if I'm telling your story, I'm almost certainly going to at least subconsciously attempt to paint it in a positive way. And I'm not out. Why would I? God, the energy it would take to be out to get everybody that you're supposedly out to get is
You don't want
to think about.
You don't want to write about you when you're bad. Do you think we enjoy writing about, oh, we're at it's another season finale that's going to end with, what coaches are getting fired, what players are getting traded. We don't like that any more than anybody else does. I mean,
You'd rather be covering the Super Bowl.
Heck yeah. I
I
want to be in Glendale right now.
when people like, there's a difference between cheering for the team you cover, but and then also being a realist. Look, I'm covering a basketball team right now that just won their second league game. They're 2-9, I guess, in the league headed down the stretch. I'd much rather than be 9-2. 9-2 would mean that I'm going to cover the NCAA tournament, that I'm covering some stuff that's interesting, that there's going to be some matchup in the tournament somewhere that's going to be this intriguing matchup, right? Maybe they're going to run up against some of the big blue blood. Maybe they run up against Duke or Michigan State or whatever, where it's going to be a lot more interesting, fun for me,
right,
as a journalist, to come up with, okay, I'm going to write about this, as opposed to, yeah, you're playing out the string and you're going to play in front of 2,000 people on Saturday, and I'm going to go and my attention span is going to drift off. And yeah, I get it. I'd much rather cover that.
We don't like asking the same questions over and over. And, I've heard you talk about the press conferences with Kermit, and do you think we like asking to the players or the coach? We don't like asking these questions. We struggle. What the heck are we going to write about now?
Sure.
We want, and so, we all want to. Well, again, we're not rooting, we're not fans, but at the same time, the rising tide lifts all ships, lifts all boats, and a good season. I think some of my best stuff has been when I've covered really good teams over my career, because generally people are in a good mood and they're more willing to give you time, which gives you more time to maybe unlock that story that hasn't been told.
All right, so let me ask you this. I'm super curious here. The Browns, coming into the season, they were going to be one of the big stories. A lot of people kind of had them as a sexy playoff pick. I think people were curious how the whole Deshaun Watson thing would work out. Massive contract that has rocked the sport in many ways. There was a lot there. Were you surprised that this team kind of ended up being a rather mediocre, probably on its best day, club in a tough division, where Cincinnati's in that division and Baltimore's in that division, and Pittsburgh by the end of the year looked like their future is pretty bright, and yet with Cleveland, you're like, I don't know what I think. Was this rust with Deshaun Watson? Was this just, is this a bad idea? Is this going to work? There's so many question marks with the Browns at the end of the season, as opposed to the at least a couple of the teams in that division.
I think when the Deshaun thing just hung over everything. So it was, because it didn't really get settled until the middle of August. It was like August 18th when they finally came to the agreement that it was going to be 11 games. And I think once it got to 11 games, I think because we didn't know what they had in Jacoby Brissett. We thought we knew what they had in Jacoby Brissett. We didn't know he was going to go out and actually play some pretty competent football.
Yeah.
It should have been him and not Tyler. If somebody was going to go to the backup, was going to go to the Pro Bowl, it should have been from the AFC North. It should have been him and not Tyler Huntley. But that's a discussion for another day. I think once it got to 11, though, I think everybody just goes, okay, this is just one long run up to when he comes back, and then let's see what they have in 4. And there were times they were an average football team. They had days where you went, look, nobody has beaten the Cincinnati Bengals the last 2 years quite like the Browns have. I think in the last two seasons, the Browns have been they're a bad matchup at times for when the Browns play well, because you got Garrett coming off the edge and getting pressure on Joe, and then you have Nick Chubb in the running game that just kind of grinds that defense down. But be that as may, they were just such an up and down team. Their defense couldn't stop a running nose, let alone a running game. So that once it got to Deshaun, it was like, well, what do we have here? And I think a lot of it was rust. you talk to people, and 2 years, nearly 2 years off is a long time to not play. I mean, he played three series in a preseason game, but what's a preseason game nowadays?
Yeah, it doesn't count.
But and talking to some people, the thought is, well, the last, you could see flashes. He played second half of Washington. You saw more explosiveness. I thought he played there were moments in every game where you saw flashes. Now the question is, well, is that leading to something? Can he take it to a significant step forward to where, does he have to get completely back to where it was in 19 and 20, where he's a Pro Bowl quarterback? Maybe, but he certainly can't take a baby step between now and next fall. He has to, and there has to be a demonstrative difference between him. And I think part of that will just be a comfort with him and Kevin Stefanski and Alex Van Pelt, their offensive coordinator, and the players around him. Like I said, Amari Cooper was not healthy for the majority of his time back on the field because of that core muscle injury. Donovan Peoples-Jones is a nice player at a receiver, but he's not. It's not like they're not running Chase Higgins and Boyd out. They're running 1.5 quality NFL receivers right now. And so I think I'm fascinated to see what this looks like next year, because I think the questions are still there. The questions haven't been answered anymore by these 6 games that he played. I think you're going to see an offense that looks a lot like Philly, what you see in Philly, because what you can do with Deshaun Watson, Jalen Hurts, there's similarities there. Both teams have great offensive lines. I think that's something that's underestimated about the Browns is a really, really good offensive line with multiple Pro Bowlers on it. Legitimate Pro Bowlers, not, alternates and stuff like that. But, but again, it all just comes down to Watson and what does Deshaun Watson, how big of a step does Deshaun Watson take? So
how much,
that's a $230 million question.
Yeah, it's such a massive contract. And I still can't believe they gave him that contract knowing that there was so much scandal around him, hanging over him. And I suppose it's in the rearview mirror. I'm curious not from covering him, because for you guys, that's not something that probably comes up anymore, but like with fans, with the community, people in Cleveland, how much does the stuff that happened and allegedly happened in Texas sort of hang over this guy that is, because of his contract and because of the position that he plays, is the face of the franchise?
Well, it still hangs over a little. It still hangs over in part because he still has a couple hanging out there. I mean, he's supposed to, I think in March, I think one of the last one, there was one that came up in October that I don't know if a trial date's been set or anything like that. But there's one of the last remaining one from the original batch. I hate to phrase it like that, but
sure.
But the original
group of women, who made accusations,
group of allegations, group of lawsuits. There was one remaining, and that goes to trial in March, I want to believe. So how much does that impact? I mean, how long does that trial go? How does that impact his participation in the off-season program? But as far as, but I mean, there's no more suspensions coming, at least for this upcoming season, I would guess, because I can't imagine, even if something comes out today, God, please don't. I mean, the wheels of justice in the NFL don't work that fast. I mean, we're still waiting. We got video of Alvin Kamara and, punching somebody in an elevator and last Pro Bowl, and nothing still happened there. So, I mean, they take their good old time with some of this stuff, but As for the fans, I think there's a certain, the ones that I think everybody has sort of gone to their corners, and there's a certain, we've gone to the place we go so often in sports, when sports and real life intersect, is a certain resignation that, okay, whether it's, that, look, talent trumps morality, they're going to do what's best for the scoreboard,
Yep.
and not necessarily for, whatever. And,
You're cheering for the long
there are
haul.
fans that, by God, I'm a Browns fan. I didn't acquire the guy, but he's wearing the laundry. So I rooted for this team. By God, I suffered through Red Right 88 and the drive and the fumble and the move and all this stuff. By God, I just want a damn Super Bowl before I die.
Yep.
And then there are some people like, peace out. This is a bridge too far. I can't do this for whatever, because it's just too much. And look, I respect.
Interesting the juxtaposition of Deshaun Watson and like Trevor Bauer and like, I keep waiting for a Major League Baseball team in the spring that Ace blows his ACL. Not Ace, is UCL or ACL, either way. More likely to be a UCL. And I keep waiting for look at you drinking the rain. I like that. I keep waiting for one of those teams to go, yeah, I get it. It's really distasteful, but he won the Cy Young. He could give us 200 innings.
Yeah, I mean,
the Major League minimum.
Somebody,
I just keep waiting for someone to do it. And like the Cleveland just went all the way in and said, hey, this is probably the only way we get Deshaun Watson in his
prime. The only way they could get in. How many times? Let's remove the baggage. And I realize it's an ocean liner's worth of baggage.
Sure.
But at the same time, a quarterback of theoretically that talent, that elite level, how often is that on the market?
Hardly
Proven,
ever.
It's never on, not in this
hardly
day.
Ever, never. I mean, never. Never. Not till maybe the very end of their careers. Like you might be able to get a deal for Aaron Rodgers today. Maybe he's 39, but I mean, he could.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting 39-year-old Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, you're getting 42-year-old Tom Brady. I mean, are you getting what's Deshaun? 28 years old? Yeah, you're not getting that guy. Yeah. Of course not. So it's out there, and you have to sort of swallow it and just go, okay. And then like you said, I mean, you think you're praying. Imagine what it's like in the Browns front office every time the phone rings. Like, please let this not be something bad. But he gives you an opportunity, and it is at the end of the day all about winning. It's like Cincinnati's got this really difficult decision to make right now about Joe Mixon and what happened, and that charge could come back up, and it's like, yeah, but I mean,
it's funny you mentioned Cincinnati, because I was talking to, after the Browns lost the second game to Cincinnati, there were early in the game, there was some jawing between Watson and some Bengals defenders, and one of the Browns offensive linemen kind of stepped in, sort of jawed at the Bengals defensive lineman, but kind of shoved Watson back to the locker room. And I went up to him after the game and I go, what was that all about? Were they kind of giving Deshaun? It's like, yeah. It's like, but glass houses, anybody? Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about your running back? I mean, because again, this is, Joe came in the league with some, he goes, didn't you guys have Vontaze Burfict? And I mean, so it's like, he goes, what's it going to be like in Pittsburgh? And, and then it's like, well, didn't your quarterback, see, we can do this all across the, all across the league.
They're not saints. The only saints in the league are the ones that play in New Orleans. I mean, that's
yeah.
it, and it's such an interesting deal that organizations have to face, is how do you address this? Because if you put, God, this sounds terrible, but if you put the morality front and center, okay, but are you going to win enough? And so you got to win. And
what were the two biggest trades in the last offseason in the NFL?
Deshaun and You're going to have to help me. I'm having a
Kansas City to Miami.
Oh yeah, Tyreek Hill.
Those two have something somewhat in common. Both of them have had issues in the past with the law, legal issues. You know, Tyreek had was it domestic violence, and Deshaun obviously has his. And this is not a what about? I'm not doing the whataboutism that
Sure.
you know. This is not a it's a Cleveland writer. You know, no. I mean, you can't hide. I mean, what Deshaun did is alleged to have done is awful. And as a father of a daughter, I know that gets tired. That's a trope that gets tired for hearing from people, but it turns the stomach, those allegations, especially when you read them in black and white. But they're allowed to play in the league. I have to focus on what goes on the field. He's not answering questions about that. He came out his first press conference when he came off suspension. He's like, I'm focused on the field. My people, not just his legal people, it's his like therapy. You know, he's going through counseling and everything as part of the suspension agreement. Told him focus on the field. Everything focused on the field. So, but I mean, when a coach gets kept who has a 500 or worse record because he does good in the community, then I believe that these teams care about
more than fair.
Something other than what the scoreboard says, especially this particular ownership group.
So let me ask you about a couple of teams in the division that you cover. What is Baltimore, in your opinion? What are they really going to do with Lamar Jackson? There's a chance that they can't reach an agreement because obviously Lamar Jackson looks at Deshaun Watson's contract. Forget the outside stuff. He looks at the contract and says, "I want that. I'm more proven as a player in Baltimore than he is in Cleveland.
Right.
I want that deal." And the Ravens go, "Well, we're not positive we want to do that deal." And so they're starting to hear these whispers, and you have a lot more league sources than I do. But I talked to some people in the league that are like, "Hey, I think Baltimore's starting to take trade calls. Like they're at least listening to when the phone rings about Lamar Jackson." So what do you think happens with this guy who is a transcendent talent, still very much in the prime of his career?
I think they tag him ultimately, but with the thought of, look, we're either going to get a haul for him in a trade, like you said, or we have him. You know, we at least have him for one more year where maybe we can smooth things out. Maybe a new offensive coordinator, connects with him, and we put finally for the first time in Ravens history put receivers around the quarterback that can actually make big plays, and maybe we can figure this out because he is the future. And maybe Lamar also can prove he can stay healthy.
Yeah.
Because this is sort of the elephant in the room when it comes to Lamar, is that the last 2 years, if what happened in 2021 where he missed December and January because of the ankle injury, which ironically happened in Cleveland. If that was just a one-off, okay. But this is the second year in a row he's basically missed all of December and January, and cost the Ravens, really cost the Ravens either a playoff appearance or a chance to go deeper in the playoffs because of an injury. You have to step back and ask, are we starting to see durability issues with Lamar?
Sure.
And that was the questions coming out of Louisville. And, I loved him at Louisville. I thought he was dynamic and amazing, and he's shown it in the NFL. And he's gotten better as the criticisms about his passing. I think he's become a better passer, but the durability, you just can't take that many hits. You just can't. You got to prove you can finish the season. In 2 straight years he hasn't. So I think that's the big question that, if nothing else, if they can't trade him, they need to see before he gets anything close to what Deshaun got. I think that's what you need to see out of him in next season in Baltimore.
You mentioned Joe Burrow earlier in the conversation. Obviously, that's priority one for the Bengals, is getting his deal done. I mean, they give them credit. They have drafted extremely well. They've been able to have a team full of guys on rookie scale deals that have been incredibly productive. Made it to a Super Bowl. Arguably should be in another Super Bowl. I mean, they're right there. They'll go in the next season as one of the 5 probably favorites to win the Super Bowl. But Burrow's going to get paid. Jamar Chase is going to get paid. T. Higgins is going to get paid. They've got decisions to make with Tyler Boyd. There's a lot there. What's from your perspective in that same division with them? What's the future hold for the Bengals?
I think I was reading some stuff out of Cincinnati, and I forget who it was, but the person was sort of breaking down the how things were playing out in terms of where guys were on their on the various deals and everything. And look, I think you cut your losses with Mixon because P. Ryan gave them quality carries last year. And you can find, this is a good running back class, deep running backs class. Running backs are a dime a dozen.
Mixon's kind of hurt himself here because a lot, because on top of the problems off the field and his background is that if you break him down from a production standpoint, he's not elite. He's not even upper crust. He's not even upper half in terms of running backs. And it's kind of a league where it's not that running backs are a dime a dozen, but you can go find a running back to be productive.
And that offense, especially because the focus of that offense is going to be on Joe and the guys on the edge. They're not going to be, you go pick a guy in the 4th round, the Tulane running back. Let's say they go get the kid out of Tulane, and plug him in the backfield. Who's to say he can't do just as I don't want to say just as well, but give you enough in that running game that you can, it takes some of the pressure off of Joe Burrow. I think, it would hurt to lose a Tyler Boyd because he's just that third, it's just that third added guy because that you have in that receiving core. But at the same time, you can find I think this is a good receiver draft. I think relatively, go out and in the 2nd round and get a Jalen Hyatt if he's there, or somebody else.
Sure.
We're talking about number 3 receivers, and we're talking about running backs in a offense that's centered around a dynamic passing game. I think there are ways Cincinnati can just sort of keep their main guys, especially Joe, especially Jamar, and still maintain those other positions where they're still very, very, very good.
Were you as impressed as I was with Pittsburgh as the season sort of went along? I would watch them and be like, oh man, they're a little better than I thought they'd be. I kind of liked Pickett. I didn't anticipate liking Pickett. And I can tell by your face, you're like, I don't know that I saw the same thing. So I'm curious.
No, that's not it. As somebody who has grown up in Northeast Ohio and, through I don't know, people outside of out of this area understand the Cleveland, Pittsburgh is like Ohio State, Michigan. It's just one of those, it's just ingrained in the area. It's as much geographic as it is. It doesn't matter good, bad, you pay attention as much to the other guy as you do your own team. And just seeing Pittsburgh too. This is the Steelers. It's why they're one of the best organizations in football, in all of sports. Actually, this is just what they do. It's just ingrained in them. While it seems to be ingrained in the Cleveland Browns to when you get to that fork in the road where you go good or bad, you veer to the bad. With the Steelers, it's like we got good or bad. We're gonna veer toward the good because it's just what that organization does. Mike Tomlin, the Rooneys, Mike Tomlin, the core. You saw guys like Cam Hayward who are left over from, that run of guys, with the Palomalos, that left over from that era of Steelers football. That it's a pride. This is what we do. We do not we may not get to the playoffs, but by God, you're going to have to carry us out to get us off the field and out of the playoff mix. So no, I wasn't exactly surprised. And as far as Pickett, I will say I need to see a little bit more from him. I only saw him one of the two games because Trubisky was starting. Your boy was starting the first time they played him.
My boy, my son always says that he my own 16-year-old messes with me about Mitch Trubisky. So
I like Mitch. I can remember. There's another guy I can remember watching in high school play, and just up in Mentor, up in Northeast Ohio. But anyways, but I saw Kenny in the season finale, and I liked what I saw. But at the same time, I think there's still some room to grow. But he was a rookie. I mean, so you give the rookie, you chalk the struggles up to being a rookie. You accentuate the positives that, hey, he did this, those fourth quarter comebacks and game winning drives the last couple of weeks. So I expect him to again next year be challenging for. I think, and especially if they keep the TJ Watt healthy, I think they can be really good next year because Pickens, Deontay Johnson are two amazing. Fryermuth, the tight end. Najee Harris is. I mean, the pieces are there for Pittsburgh. It to be really Pittsburgh and Cincinnati battling for that division as much as anybody, with the Browns all dependent on what Deshaun Watson.
All right, some rapid fire stuff. I've kept you way too long. The Chicago Bears do what with the first pick in the draft?
Traded.
I
think they trade. I don't know. That's. I think they trade it. Now talk to me tomorrow, and I might say they take Will Anderson, and talk to me the day after that. I might say trade it again, and it really is. I think they're going to take this right down to the last second and see what they. I mean, I would
too. Oh yeah,
because I think there's
be an auction.
I think they have something. I'm intrigued by what Fields did the second half of last season. That you got something there, but if somebody knocks your socks off, go take it.
Yeah, what they feel about Fields, not publicly, but what they feel privately about Fields inside their own building would be the one thing I'd really love to know. Like, what do you really believe in your heart of hearts, in your soul of souls? What do you believe about Justin Fields? Because that impacts what you do, what you don't do, etc. All right, Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback for who next season, if Tennessee. He's a quarterback at all? Titans.
Tennessee. You're starting to hear just a little bit of buzz about Tennessee being a possible landing spot, and I'd be fascinated. You put Aaron Rodgers, if he can still play at a reasonably high level, you put him in that with Derrick Henry, and hey, maybe Treylon Brooks develops a little bit, in his second year with Mike Vrabel. I think you got something there. With the Titans.
No, they'd be good. All right, Derek Carr is the quarterback where?
Is it still? Do they do the Who Day down in Cincinnati and New Orleans also, or
it's who dat?
Who dat? I knew it was. I knew there was a dispute between Cincinnati and New Orleans. I think he's I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know how Mickey Loomis is going to make this salary cap magic work. But I think he's a New Orleans Saint.
All right. Rumor is they're playing a game on Sunday in Glendale. I'm still somewhat protesting. But we got Kansas City, Philadelphia going for a Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes getting another crack at it. Jalen Hurts, 24, getting a start in a Super Bowl. Who wins and why?
I like Philly just because I like their overall team just a little bit more. I really like the Philly offensive line. I love the Philly defensive line. I think between Hassan Reddick and Fletcher Cox and some of those guys up front, I think they're able to get pressure on Willis Reed there. I meant Patrick Mahomes. And
That's well done.
and that I just think it's a great game. I think it's going to be a great game, but I think Philly wins. I saw them back in August. They were in Cleveland for a couple of days of joint practices, and I watched them, and seeing that those line of scrimmage. You talk about line of scrimmage. They are so good at the line of scrimmage, and I just think that's the difference in why they win the game.
All right, here's a crazy one. Everyone always talks about this Super Bowl. Year out, if you had to put money on who's in the next Super Bowl, who you got? You giving Buffalo another run? Is this the year the Bengals break through? Does Kansas City do it again? And then, I mean, the NFC's like wide open outside of Philly.
Give me Cincinnati, Philly.
Oh, okay.
Just right now, today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about the quarterback. 49ers would be there if I knew what their quarterback situation was going to look like. Cowboys, would they be there if I knew that I could believe in the Cowboys?
He's not going to do it. Dak's not going to get you there.
Wherever Aaron Rodgers lands could change. Like if he lands in Miami, like let's see Aaron Rodgers land.
Oh, sure. They're a factor. I mean, he's a factor. And I agree with you about Tennessee, although the Titans just look to be taking steps back.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, they look like that. But
if you give them a competent star quarterback, I mean, it's a league. It's a quarterback league that completely changes everything.
Right. So, but I just really like Cincinnati. I mean, I just really like what I see out of Cincinnati. They just look like they're that team it's their time. Their time is coming sooner rather than later. And I think that's next year. I don't know if they win it, but if I had to pick right now, I'd go Bengals, Eagles, just because again, line of scrimmage, and I just like the way that Eagles team has been built.
Chris, I can't thank you enough for the time. It's been a pleasure to getting to know you and spending some time with you. I hope to do it again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks for having me on, Neal.
Appreciate you.
Yep.
Our thanks to Chris Easterling for his time on the show. Also, our thanks to Carl Lafferty and Neal Stratton for their time tonight. This will be up in podcast form on Friday as the Oxford Exxon podcast. Speaking of, we'll be back on Monday with another edition of the Oxford Exxon podcast. We'll recap Ole Miss, South Carolina basketball, Super Bowl 57, and discuss OU and Texas into the SEC and whatever else comes up from the sports weekend ahead. Thanks for making our show a part of your day, a part of your week. We certainly appreciate you. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the Super Bowl, and good night.